everyone. Welcome back to my channel AWS DevOps Niche 11. So in this video, we are going to talk about the Cloudfront service, and we will also do a lab demo on the same. So some of the subscribers had asked me to post a video on the Cloudfront service, and that is the reason I'm creating this video. So this is what we are going to see as part of the agenda. What is the Cloudfront service? And how do you create a Cloudfront distribution to expose the static website that is hosted on a S3 bucket? So basically, we can have our application endpoints across multiple sources. So we can have our application hosted on a S3 bucket, a static content. We can also have an application load balancer or a classic load balancer. So there can be multiple sources where we can host our application. But for this video, I'm going to demo on how do you create a Cloudfront distribution for a content that is hosted on the S3 bucket, typically a static content hosted on the S3 bucket. Now, what is Cloudfront? So let's try to understand that. So if you see, Cloudfront is a service which is used to distribute the static and dynamic web content such as HTML. It can be a .css file, it can be a .php or an image file and media files through an optimized network routing path. So this is the keyword, optimized network routing path. So if at all you want to get a faster response for your applications, you can use this Cloudfront service, which will use an optimized network routing path in order to deliver the content at a much faster rate. And how it does that? That is where you can see this second point. So this Cloudfront is a service which leverages the edge locations for the faster distribution of the content. Okay, so that optimized network routing path is nothing but the edge locations what the Cloudfront will use in order to distribute the content to the end users at a much faster rate. So let me explain about what is the edge location. Let's say this is your source S3 bucket where you have hosted your content, your application. So let's assume that this is an S3 bucket in Australia. Okay, so you have your S3 bucket which is created in Australia, and it is actually holding your media files. Let's say it's having your audio and video files, etc. Let's say we have an end user from India who is trying to request this content from the S3 bucket. So there is an end user from India who is trying to access this content from the S3 bucket. So basically, he is going to hit the usual S3 endpoint and it is going to request for the content. Okay. So he's placing a request to download the media files. And as part of that, because of a huge geographic distance between India and Australia, definitely there is going to be some packet losses. Okay, there is going to be some packet drops happening due to latency in the network. Now, what is the impact to the end user? If at all he is downloading a video file, he is not going to get it consistently. He is going to face streaming issues because of this packet drops. And ultimately, this is going to be a end user experience deterioration, right? Where the user is not really getting this content at a faster pace. There is a slow response. So how AWS fixes this issue, this latency issue, via the edge locations? So what they do is, they will actually set up something kind of a mini data center, which is what we call it as a edge location. Let's say this edge location will be generally hosted near to the the end user location. In this case, let's say that edge location is hosted in Singapore, or it is provisioned in the Singapore location, which is much closer to India. Okay. And basically the media files which is available in the source S3 bucket, that will be cached onto this edge location in Singapore. Basically the content will be cached. Okay. So edge location is basically a kind of a mini data center which is having all the facilities in order to catch the content from the source location. And this edge location is generally in a very close proximity to the end users. So now with this edge location, what happens is that whenever the end user from India is requesting a content from the S3 bucket in Australia, he is going to get the content served from the edge location in Singapore. And since this edge location is at a much closer proximity to the end user, there is not going to be any packet drop issues. There is not going to be any latency issues. And this end user is going to get the content at a much faster rate. And that is the reason this edge locations is typically used to improve the application performance, because it is using an optimized network routing path, and it is in very close proximity to the end users. So that is the reason generally this Cloudfront service is typically used to improve the performance of your application, because it leverages the edge location. Now let us go through the lab demo instructions. So first I will create a S3 bucket. Then I will enable the static website hosting on the S3 bucket. And after that, I will be uploading an index.html file that is having the static content. Post that, I will be creating a Cloudfront distribution to host that static content, mapping the distribution to the master S3 bucket. These are all the steps that we are going to do. So now let us go into the AWS console. First, I will create a S3 bucket. So this is my AWS console, and I will just say create bucket. I'll be creating the bucket in the North Virginia region. Let me give it a name. My demo bucket. Okay, and let me enable the ACLs, because I want to make this bucket as a public access, so that I'm removing all this. And I'm clicking this acknowledgement here. Now let me go ahead and create the bucket. Okay, so now the bucket has been created. The next thing is enable the static website hosting. So if at all you want to have this bucket act as a static website hosting repository, then you need to enable this option under the bucket properties. How do you enable it? I go to the properties here. Then if I scroll to the bottom, we have this option static website hosting. Currently, you see that this is disabled. So let me click edit, and I will go ahead and enable this. Then it is asking me to configure the hosting type. So we can either host a static website, or we can redirect the request for an object. So I'm going with this first option, host a static website. And if that is the case, then we'll have to upload the index document for it. So I have an index.html file, which I will be uploading it here. Or I will mention that file name as index.html, that is having the static content. Now let me go ahead and save the changes. Now we have enabled that static website hosting on the bucket. We can see here. Now it is showing the bucket hosting is enabled. You can, the website hosting is enabled, right? Okay. So now we have created a S3 bucket. We have enabled the static website hosting. Now what is the next step? We have to upload the index.html file on the bucket. which is having the static content. So let me go ahead and do that. So this is my bucket. I go into the objects tab and I click upload here and I click add files. Now I'm going to search for the index.html. Okay, so this is the file. Let me upload this. Okay, you can see here, this file has been uploaded. And I will go into the permissions and I will give a grant public read access for this index.html. Then I will click upload. Okay, so we have uploaded this index.html file as well, which is going to host that static content. Now, if you see, this is the object URL with which I would be able to access the static content. So if I right click this and if I say open link in a new window, this is that static web page, whatever S3 bucket is hosting, right? But now I do not want to access this bucket endpoint. Instead of that, I want to access it via the Cloudfront so that the end user is able to get the content very, very fast. As we discussed that Cloudfront is leveraging the edge locations. So now we have to create a Cloudfront distribution which is going to map to this particular S3 endpoint that is having the static content. So let me go ahead and create a Cloudfront distribution. Delete the existing one. Okay. Now, so you can just search for Cloudfront. You can see here, Global Content Delivery Network. So Cloudfront is a content delivery network from AWS, which is leveraging the edge locations to distribute the content very, very fast to the end users, right? So there is one more popular content service provider. So if at all you have not heard of it, it is Akamai. I hope many would have heard about Akamai. It's a very popular content delivery service provider, right? And even AWS have some tie-ups with Akamai for distributing their the content hosted on the AWS application endpoints. Okay, Akamai is a very popular content delivery service provider. Okay, now let me go ahead and create a Cloudfront distribution, and I will be choosing the origin domain. What is the origin domain in our case? That is our the static content of the web page. It is in the S3 bucket, right? So I'm going to select the S3 bucket here, and origin access is public. Let me just keep scrolling down. All other options I'm leaving it to default. So we are not enabling any security protection. So I'm saying do not enable any security protections. And in the default root object, I'm going to say index.html so that with the Cloudfront distribution, you need not type in this index.html. Straight away, you can use the distribution endpoint to load your static web content. Okay. Let us go ahead and create the distribution. So you can see here now the status is deploying. It is going to take some time to create the distribution, and maybe I will pause the video for some time, and I will reconnect once the distribution is created. Okay, so now the distribution has been created, and we will see how to access the distribution. So let me click the distribution, and you can see this distribution domain name, right? So this is the endpoint for the Cloudfront. Okay, so now we can access our source content via this endpoint. So if I just select this particular endpoint and I'm going to put it in the browser, you can see here it is directly pointing to the S3 buckets content, right? But now we are going via the Cloudfront endpoint, which is this cloudfront.net. Okay, and typically that indicates that it is using the edge locations in order to deliver the content to the end users. This is how you can basically create a distribution in Cloudfront and map it to any of the application endpoints. The application endpoint can be a static content in a S3 bucket, or it can be an application running in your application load balancer, or it can be in a classic load balancer. So there can be multiple sources where you can run your applications and link it with the Cloudfront distribution. Okay. So anything with cloudfront.net, we can understand that it is actually the content is getting delivered via the edge locations. Okay. So I hope this lab demo session was helpful. So I also want to add that I am delivering trainings on AWS and DevOps. So if at all anyone would be interested, you can send an email to the mentioned email ID. So the trainings on AWS is typically to help you, clear the AWS SysOps certification exam. If you are more keen on taking up the AWS SysOps certification exam, I have all the necessary modules to, cover as part of that training, and I'll give you guidance for the certification exam as well. Similarly, with respect to DevOps, across all the DevOps lifecycle, starting from continuous development till continuous integration, continuous testing, deployment, etc. I cover all the tools, and I typically give more weightage on Kubernetes, the Prometheus, the Helm charts, right? And how do you really stand up the monitoring tools like Prometheus and the reporting tool Grafana using the Helm charts, right? So there will be more weightage given on those areas along with the Terraform. So I'll be covering Terraform as well as part of the DevOps course. So if anyone would be interested, you can feel free to send an email to this email ID. I will be happy to share the course details along with the fee structure. So that's all I had for this video. But before that, so this training mode will be happening via Zoom. The class recordings will be uploaded onto the Google Drive at the end of each and every class. Whether it is AWS or DevOps, it's going to be a 5 to 6 weeks of interactive training, completely focused on the hands-on lab exercises. Also, at the end of the course, I will also be providing guidance on the resume preparation, and we can have some mock interview sessions as well. I can help with sharing some interview questions. And if at all you have any other additional questions, I can take it. Okay, so that's all I had for this video. I hope this content was helpful. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, please subscribe to my channel, and you can refer this video to your known circles. So thank you everyone, and I will meet you all in my next video.